Amanda Lang is host of Taking Stock, which airs Friday nights, 6 o'clock on BNN Bloomberg and all over the iHeart Radio network. We talk business every Friday afternoon. Amanda, welcome back. Thank you.
Hey, Aaron.
Let me start by talking about the CEBA loan program. You know, we talked about this a couple of days ago. We had the Prime Minister come out the other day and make it very apparent and very clear that the government, despite what businesses, many of them, I think the number's over 160,000, are still asking because they're going to have trouble paying back their loans. And I'm curious, the government says, the Prime Minister said, look, we've already extended this, and we've talked about this before. What are you hearing in terms of businesses? How serious an issue is this going to be, do you think?
So we have heard from folks like the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and the Restaurants Association that it's a big deal. There's a sizable number of businesses that may struggle here. There's certainly a sizable number of those who took the loans who haven't paid them back. But we, as you and I have talked before, a big number have, right? More than half, even before this week, had already repaid their loans. I imagine a whole bunch more chose to repay them before the deadline. There were good incentives to do so, right? You got free money. If you repaid this loan, you got up to $20,000 forgiven off the total of a max of 60. So there were incentives to do it. If you can't, yes, now it turns into a regular old loan for 3 years at 5%. Still a not bad rate, I would say. And I'm kind of sympathetic to the government's view that it was time to wrap the program up.
You know, the only question then becomes, and we've kind of had mixed opinions on this. Obviously, if you find yourself in that situation, you think it's unfair, you need more time. But there are government programs we discovered here. We talked to an accountant during the week that still make paying it back somewhat reasonable. You can do a deal with your bank. There are private lenders out there as well. Do you think there's concern here that if too many businesses end up having to shut down because of this, it reflects badly on the government?
I don't think so, in the sense that, you know, if you look at the data on just the number of businesses as a matter of course that don't make it, it's a pretty big number. And so, yes, there may be businesses that find they can't survive here, but it's been a couple of years of post-pandemic life. And although it's true for some, revenue didn't ever return to what it had been pre-pandemic, there's a kind of a reality to that you need to adjust to and move on from. So some will go under, and I don't mean to sound hard-hearted about that, but that is the nature of kind of businesses. They start, they fail, it's what happens. So if people are sticking around in a business that shouldn't exist because people don't want their product enough, maybe it is time to move on.
Speaking of hard-hearted, Loblaws has decided they're going to do away with that 50% discount on food that's about to expire. They've taken a lot of bad press for this.
Yeah, you wonder whether there's a team inside Loblaws saying, maybe we shouldn't have done that, because they definitely, the change is to go to 30% of a discount, which is what their competitors do. It does not fit well with the people who like this and would regularly avail themselves of it. This is a deep discount on things that are about to go bad. So it's actually good for everybody that these things get purchased. There was this immediate cry of collusion because 30% is what their competitors tend to do on this stuff. We right away heard from experts, Aaron, who said it's not necessarily collusion. It can just be observation, right? Why would you make less than your competitor if you don't have to? You can just look across the street and see what they're doing.
Right.
But it is bad PR. I mean, the timing kind of stinks at a time when Loblaws could use good press rather than bad press.
Okay, another story, and we've talked a lot about this on our show here, immigration. We had our own premier the other day calling on the federal government to start paying for what it's been costing us to take in immigrants and asylum seekers here. Your story, immigration and the population trap theory. So what is that?
So National Bank put out a report this week basically saying, you know, we like to think of immigration as being pro-growth, and in our country's history, that's been true. Immigrants add to our economic pie. When you get too much too fast, you can get into what's called a population trap. It's actually Malthusian theory by another name, if you want to geek out on that. But basically it just means your economy, we don't have collective savings to create the jobs for the newcomers. So businesses and individuals just cannot create enough new activity for the newcomers, and it becomes sort of top heavy. We have seen, of course, per capita GDP declining in the country. You know, when you factor in immigration, we have not seen growth. So that's a bad story. The real debate is it short term or is it long term? Is it a trap we're now in, as these guys are querying, or will we see, you know, other forces come into play and growth created? I think the government's hoping that happens. But meantime, you get a lot of these other negative consequences like a housing crunch and higher cost of living. So they're raising this possibility that this has been a very bad idea. And in fact, the rate of immigration has been, we had 1.2 million new Canadians last year. If you include non-permanent residents like students and temporary workers, they think it should be more like 300 to 500,000. So a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I wonder what the government does on this. Of course, we found out last week that a government report 2 years ago suggested they were moving too quickly on immigration to begin with. They chose to ignore that. Mm-hmm. And I think now you have to wonder, can you backpedal? Can you change your numbers?
Well, we're certainly seeing them changing their kind of storyline on things like international students. They didn't pay a lot of attention to it. It's not in their control. And suddenly they're saying, hey, wait a minute, there's way too many. There's 800,000 of them last year. That's too many. So, it'd be great to take a more holistic view. And, frankly, on that file, I don't know about you, but I feel like the students are being scapegoated a little bit here because, that is a huge opportunity. These are people that have gone, way out of their way and around the world, and that's kind of a good source of future immigration for us. And suddenly they're being seen as sort of this big problem, whereas they might be actually the best form of new Canadian we could find.
Of course, we scapegoat our students here a little differently in Quebec. We make them pay exorbitant tuition now, at least English university. But that's a whole other story. Real quickly, before we get out of here, inflation data. Look, I know in the U.S., people got very excited towards the end of the year when the Fed said or projected there might be 3-4 rate cuts. It looks like now people are saying that may not happen until the second or maybe even third quarter of the year. Where are we in this? Because the Bank of Canada is coming up next week with their decision.
Yeah, we don't expect nobody expects the bank really to do anything next week. They're going to stay on hold again. And the inflation data we got this week as well kind of suggests that it's what Tiff Macklem said at the end of last year. We're on track, but don't think that anything's going to change really, really soon. So, spring, maybe even summer before rates start to come down. Yeah,
and by the way, the number, what do we have? 3.4 for the inflation reading that came out at the beginning of the week. But the one there that I think caught a lot of people's attention, that's 7.7% in rent, still continuing to go up. That's going to be a tough one to turn around.
That's a big one. But we should note we're also seeing wages are still running hot as well, right? So wages 5.7% recent read. So at the very least, you got to pay your rent. Your wages should go up. They're not going up fast enough, but at least we are seeing some gains on the affordability side. It's matching up a little bit better.
Amanda, thank you so much. Always appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Aaron.
Amanda Lang, host of Taking Stock. You can check it out tonight, 6 o'clock on BNN Bloomberg and the iHeart Radio Network.